To individuals that owe the IRS $10,000 or more in back taxes. And if you qualify, we can guarantee that you won't be writing a big fat check to the IRS, or our services cost you nothing. The first 100 people that call today will get a free tax consultation worth $500. Stop worrying about your IRS problem. We can help you, we promise. Call the tax doctor right now. I mean right now, to learn more.
800-240-4587. 800-240-4587. 800-240-4587. That's 800-240-4587.
Why have thousands of aspiring authors teamed up with Christian Faith Publishing to publish their book? Because Christian Faith Publishing is an author-friendly publisher who understands that your labor is more than just a book. We provide authors freedom and flexibility throughout the publishing process, professional book editing, award-winning design, and some of the highest royalty structures in the publishing industry. And as always, you will retain 100% of the rights to your book.
I was looking to find a company that I could trust, one that assisted in the editing process completely.
The most important qualities that I was looking for was a publisher who was honest and upfront, no hidden costs or fees, and owning the rights to my own work.
Christian Faith Publishing will publish, market, and sell your books in all major bookstores, online booksellers, as well as specialty Christian bookstores. Call for your free author submission kit.
800-978-4812. 800-978-4812. 800-978-4812. That's 800-978-4812.
Here's important new information from the Diabetes Solution Center for you, a family member, or a loved one suffering with diabetes. If you have lost your provider, or if you need a provider for diabetic supplies, you may qualify to receive your diabetic testing supplies now with little or no out-of-pocket cost, regardless of your age. All you need is Medicare or private insurance to be potentially eligible. Call the Diabetes Solution Center right now for details. Just takes a couple of minutes. Our friendly, knowledgeable agents will give you free, no-obligation information, handle all the insurance paperwork, and make sure your supplies are delivered directly to your door for free.
Call U.S. Medical Supply 24 hours a day. 800-597-9323. 800-597-9323. 800-597-9323. Call right now. 800-597-9323.
What's up? What's up? How's it going, North Texas? Uh, Cowboys fans, Wings fans, how's it going to y'all specifically? There's a lot of headlines going around right now. So Cowboys fans, we are dealing with the aftermath of a loss, but there's been some mixed reviews on it. There's some people who are saying, oh, well, we like how the team looked. We like the physicality. And then there are some people who are just pissed off that it was a loss, especially to the rival Eagles. And then on the Wings side, oh my goodness, I've been out of the loop a little bit with the Dallas Wings. I come back and all of a sudden there's rumors about Angel Reese being traded. There's people upset about the head coach sticking around. I don't really know what to make of it, if I'm being quite honest. But we're going to start with a little recap from the last time I was here. And for those of you who are new to this show, this is another episode of Bitches Love Sports on NTX Radio. I am your host, Jazz Monet. And first, I just want to say thank you to everyone who was supportive in some way, shape, or form while I was in New York. I had a great time at the U.S. Open. It was truly a special experience. I didn't know what to expect going to New York and going to that event. Not at all. Like, you kind of hear things about the Honey Deuces, but like to actually be there at the Billie Jean King Tennis Center and see what the atmosphere is like, to see what the crowd is like, what the fans are like, just how cool everybody is. That was truly a special experience. And shout out to Naomi Osaka. She ended up making it to the quarterfinals. So the first night that I was in New York, I got to see her pull off a big win. The second night I was in New York, unfortunately, ended up being a kind of disappointing loss. I think she struggled the most that she's struggled the entire tournament against Anisimova. But on that note, shout out to Anisimova for representing the USA in the finals. And shout out to Aryna Sabalenka for winning it. And also to Carlos Alcaraz for getting the champion title on the men's side. But no, that was a great experience. And I appreciate y'all for being the type of audience that doesn't trip when I talk about tennis. I also appreciate y'all for being the type of audience to support that content. And the match before Naomi Osaka's match was one that was not I was watching, but I wasn't that invested in. Like it's hard not to watch Arena Sabalenka. She's one of the best tennis players in the world. So you're watching. But I was there to see Naomi Osaka, let's be real, right? So I'm there, I'm watching the game, and the Cowboys game starts before Naomi Osaka comes onto the court. So I pull up the Cowboys game on my phone and I'm watching, and then all of a sudden Naomi Osaka's game starts, and so that's why I turned that off. So with the Cowboys game, give me 1 second. I think there's something going on with the video. There we go. So with the Cowboys game, I stopped watching it probably late in the second half. And so that's where that comment that I made on Twitter about like me being a little bit disappointed in the defense came from. Not that they were doing badly. And I'm going to get to what they did well, because they did a lot of things well. It wasn't that they were doing poorly. It was the fact that they weren't getting home. And I mean, Saquon Barkley is just strong. So there was that. So I was like, I don't want to get that confused. Like, oh, I didn't like what the defense looked like. I actually did like what the defense looked like. There was just some things that I was disappointed in. And I think some people took that as me feeling like the defense did a bad job. Now, something else that I will say was that I was surprised to see how long the game went on. Eventually, I found out about the weather delay. And then by the time I saw the score, because like I honestly thought the Cowboys were going to pull it off. By the time I saw the score, that's when I started asking the questions on Twitter, and everybody filled me in on what happened in the rest of the game. So I've got some notes on that we're going to get to, but I want to get some of the Dallas Wings content out the way first, because that whole situation. Okay, I'll put it this way. The Dallas Wings season is coming to an end. And so on paper, there's not really much to discuss. On paper, it's like, okay, they are the last in the league. They have the best odds of getting the number 1 draft pick next season. And so there's not really much to talk about for the rest of the season. But somehow, the Dallas Wings are getting pulled into the discussion about Angel Reese and her situation with the Chicago Sky. So there are some people who are saying that Angel Reese should demand a trade, and that the Dallas Wings should be her new home. And so I kind of want to talk about that for a second, because first I want to talk about the Angel Reese situation in the first place, because I feel like it's a little bit of a polarizing discussion. So for those who haven't heard, Angel Reese made some comments about her teammates. And when it comes to what the Chicago Sky look like this year, we just talked about the Dallas Wings and the fact that they're last in the league. And I've talked about them on this show throughout the season, and the fact that, there have been questions about the skills of the head coach. There have been questions about the lineup, about if they have the right roster, so on and so forth. It hasn't been a great season. Even star players who normally play really well, like Arike Egunbowale, haven't really had the best year, right? And so the Chicago Sky are literally one level above them. The Dallas Wings are at the bottom, and the Chicago Sky, I think, have one more win than the Dallas Wings right now. So we're talking about another team that's not doing well. And in so many words, Angel Reese said to the Chicago Tribune that she recognized that and that she wasn't going to put up with it. And I believe one of the direct quotes was that she said something along the lines of, "We can't put up with the same shit that we did this year." Okay, so this is the star player of the team essentially saying that, what we did on the court this year, we can't stand for it. And, the WNBA, they have 43-game seasons. And so to be at this point in the season where I think they have 2 or 3 games left and you've only won 10 on the entire season, who can really be mad at her for that? Who can really be mad at Angel Reese for saying that we can't do the same shit next year that we did this year, right? I feel like that's what you would expect from any star player, that pretends to be competitive or that is competitive. I say pretend because I'm like, even if you're pretending to be competitive, you couldn't even pretend like that's okay. Like if you want to be the most optimistic person in the world, there's no way you can spin that to make it seem okay, right? So when people were upset that she said that, I was just kind of like, okay, well, what did you expect her to say? Do you want her to act like 10 wins is all right? Do you want her to act like the performance of her team is acceptable? Like, I don't think that's what you would want from your star player. But anyway, her comments were perceived as comments, quote unquote, detrimental to the team. Now, I'm not sure what they perceive to be detrimental. The only thing that I can think is that she offended someone and the team felt like they needed to take action in order to keep the peace among teammates. Because she didn't call out anybody by name. She said that she wanted the team to get better talent, which I'm like, if you've only won 10 games on the year, then obviously you need to get better talent. And if you're one of the people who feels offended by that statement, well, if the shoe fits, wear it, honestly, because there's with a 10 win team, every single player on that team should be looking in the mirror, examining their own film, looking at their own stats, and determining if they should bring more to the court. If you are on a team that has only won 10 games and the star player says that they want better talent on the team and you get mad, to me, that's a sign that, you're one of those people. Because a hit dog gonna holler, right? So anyway, she said that she wanted better talent on the team. And then she made a comment about Courtney Vandersloot, basically saying that it didn't make sense for the Chicago Sky to try to build a team around a 36-year-old player with an ACL injury. And honestly, I'm not mad at her for that either, because let's think about it. If she were to say that she didn't believe Vandersloot could come back and contribute, I could see Vandersloot or fans of hers being offended by that, to suggest that there's no way that she can come back. But what Angel Reese said was that it wouldn't make sense to build a team around a 36-year-old that's coming back from an ACL injury. And I think that's fair, because when you think about building a team, you think about years into the future. And how many WNBA players have actually played into their late 30s, into their 40s, especially with a major injury like an ACL injury? So is it really that bad for her to say it's not smart to build a team around someone who's under those circumstances? I don't think it is. And so like I said, the only thing I can think is that there are some people on the team who took it personally, and so the team felt like they had to do something. And so a half-game suspension, which, why? But a half-game suspension is what they decided to do. And the game tonight, I believe, is the game where she's supposed to be suspended for half a game. So that being said, a lot of people took that as a sign that Angel Reese and the Chicago Sky, their time together is coming to an end. Basically suggesting that there's too many hard feelings, too many bad feelings, there's animosity at this point, and that she needs to find a new home. And if it were to be with the Dallas Wings, I can't say that I'd be mad at that, because she's got skills that I feel like the Dallas Wings could benefit from. I know the Dallas Wings are a sneaky good rebounding team, but on paper, they look that way, but let's be real. That comes from a few games where their rebounds are really high. I do feel like it was kind of luck that their rebounds were so high, and also the fact that they missed a lot of shots. And so a lot of that was once they got the hang of offensive rebounding. But what we would actually like to see from the Dallas Wings is a team that is making more of those shots, scoring more points, winning more games, and still is able to incorporate rebounding strategically. And so that's one of the areas where I think Angel Reese could come into play, because even when she was on a good team, like when she was at LSU, her rebounding was used as a strategic component of the game plan, an asset to what they were bringing to the court, and they were still winning games. It wasn't the result of, we've missed so many shots that we get so many rebounds per game, right? I feel like that's a fine line here. That's the difference. So that's definitely a huge thing. Also, in terms of having a star forward, Angel Reese at 6'3", she can bring that component to the Dallas Wings. I know the Wings, they still have Lee Rue and some of the other big players that they've acquired throughout the season. So Lee, They've got Luisa, so on and so forth. I'm not looking at a roster. Don't judge me. But as far as having a star forward, I feel like Angel Reese can bring that to the table. She can be the answer to the pick and roll for Paige Beckers for years to come. And then just the star power of Angel Reese, Paige Beckers, Arike Gumbawale. I feel like that trio could do a lot for the foundation of the Wings, not to mention the fact that you still have people like JJ Quinterly in the mix. So when it comes to Angel Reese joining the Wings, like, I'm not saying that that would be a good option just because the Wings did poorly and they need help. I'm like, I could really see her fitting into that game plan, and on a team where it feels like they're kind of in a rebuilding mode around this one particular star anyway, I could see her being a good component. So that's kind of where I am with that. Like, a few people had questions about that over the weekend and early this week. And so I just kind of wanted to put my take out there. Like, yo, I could see this being a thing and I'm here for it. What's good? What are y'all talking about in the chat? Hey, JV. Hey, Chris. How are y'all doing? Thanks for joining in the chat. Don't forget to hit the like button. Slow motion. Oh, you're responding to Chris. I'm like, is the video in slow motion? Don't scare me like that. All right. So that being said, let's move over to the NFL world. And of course, as usual, if y'all have any questions about the Wings, you can put those in the chat. But oh, Chris said, I thought she took a shot at some of the players. I don't know. I saw a clip of a video. Someone was talking about it. So let me just clarify that real quick before we start talking about the Cowboys, Chris. So she, in my opinion, and let me see if I can pull up the article. It was hard to get because the article itself is behind a paywall, but it's an article that was for the Chicago Tribune. So let me put it this way. When it comes to how statements like what she said can be perceived, when it's written, first of all, you can extract certain quotes and decide what you want to put out there. So there was one section where, okay, so here's a good example. It says, while praising Vandersloot's abilities and leadership, Reese balked at the prospect of building the roster around a point guard attempting to return from ACL tear at age 36, right? So that's an example of how you can pick and choose quotes, because they included the quote where Angel Reese talked about why it wouldn't be smart to build a roster around Vandersloot, but they didn't, whatever the quote was where she praised Vandersloot, they mentioned that she did, but they didn't put the quote. So when people start pulling quotes for their tweets and for their clips and for their videos, because essentially what happens is when topics like get discussed, content creators will take it and they'll baby bird it to their audiences. So in other words, they'll take it and they'll chew it, they'll boil it down to like the most digestible parts. And usually the most clickable parts, if we're being honest. They're not going to pick the parts that tell the whole story. They're going to pick the parts for you guys that will get the most clicks, that will get the most shares, that will get the most engagement. And unfortunately, that is controversy. So they're going to talk about the fact that she said, we can't put up with the same shit that we did this year. They're going to talk about the fact that she seemed to judge Vandersloot's age. They're not going to talk about the fact that she praised Vandersloot's abilities and leadership. They're not going to talk about the fact that Angel Reese is a competitor and she wants to win. And look at what the rest of her roster put up, and can you blame her for saying she wants better talent on the team? Because then that makes her look like a reasonable person who just wants to win. That makes her look like a competitor who's working hard and she wants teammates around her who work just as hard. But it's a lot easier to paint Angel Reese as, oh, here's Angel Reese being a bitch again, because that's kind of the archetype that's been assigned to her anyway. Chris, can you be a mod? I need to remember how to make moderators. I don't remember how to do it, Chris. When I made JV a moderator, something was happening in the chat and I needed a moderator. And I literally paused what I was doing and I made him a moderator. And you weren't here. Hi, Kelvin. I love you too. So yeah, I'll work on that. For you, Chris, I'll work on that. Chris also says, Jazz, is a WNBA negotiation what's coming up have anything to do with all this? Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark sitting out for the season, conspiracies floating around the net. Okay, so let's talk about that for a second too. We can round out this segment with just talking about the WNBA, and we can come back after the break and talk about the Cowboys. So there's three components to your question, Chris, and I'm going to bring it up on the screen just just to make sure people know what we're talking about, because I'm really glad that you asked about this. Okay, so you're asking about negotiations, Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, and the conspiracies. So the conspiracies around the WNBA have come from the fact that that is an easy way to get engagement on stories about the WNBA. So, and this is something that I have talked to other WNBA journalists about, where the coverage of the WNBA has just been trash this season, because we're in this era of media where if you can get enough engagement, it is relatively easy to pull a check. There was a time where, in order to build a career in the world of media, in the world of sports media / sports journalism, you needed credentials, you needed a unique take, you needed analysis, you needed to be able to interview players and talk to players. And now it's just like, if enough people click on your stuff, even a few years ago when I started writing, um, right before I started writing, they wanted articles to be 800 to 1,000 words. Right when I started writing, it was like, okay, 500 words is enough. Now, 250 words is an article. Why? Because that's long enough to put an ad on the page. That's long enough to where if somebody clicks on it, they'll get ad revenue. So there's a lot of publications that don't need more than 250 words. Do you know how easy it is to write complete and utter bullshit and make it sound legitimate if all you have to do is come up with 250 words about any idea that pops into your head? It's ridiculous. It literally is ridiculous. And so when it came to the WNBA and a lot of the headlines that we're seeing out there, what people were realizing was that the WNBA audience is bigger than ever, but it's not an audience that's educated enough to be able to differentiate between good content and bad content. So I know a lot of y'all in the chat are Cowboys fans. Y'all have been Cowboys fans long enough, and y'all have watched the NFL long enough to where when certain headlines start coming out, you know it's rage bait, you know it's clickbait, you know it's bullshit, right? A lot of the WNBA audience is not as well informed, is not as well educated. So what people are doing is they're putting out sensationalist headlines to get clicks. They are putting out tweets, they are putting out short videos, because not only do articles have the ability to be short, but it's like you only need a 30-second video to get clicks and to get views and to start getting those paychecks rolling in, right? So you got a lot of people who are putting out sensationalist bullshit for engagement, and so it's resulted in a lot of conspiracy theories and a lot of just nonsense that people know people will find interesting, and that they don't know enough about the WNBA to know that it's bullshit. That's where we are with that. So, Caitlin Clark is injured. It is really convenient to tie Caitlin Clark sitting out to, oh, she's thinking about going to Unrivaled, or, oh, this is, I think I saw somebody say something about this is the WNBA players' way of showing the WNBA how their numbers will drop if certain players aren't around. So basically like a preemptive threat if the CBA negotiations don't get done. That's not what this is. And at some point, I'll go back and we'll talk about what the WNBA actually has to do with negotiations. But there's some things that they really do have to work out there that I think people don't understand about. And I hate to say it, but I got to put it out there, even if just for the sake of time. The numbers for the WNBA, not their viewership, but the valuation is inflated. So we don't want to confuse the valuation of the WNBA with what they actually are able to split in terms of revenue that they can share with the players. And so that's why it seems like they're not sharing money that they could share, but they really kind of are, but they don't have as much money as people think they do, because valuations are not the same thing as actual revenue. And I'll put a pin in that so that we can talk about that. Caitlin Clark is injured. She hurt her groin. And it just hasn't been safe for her to go back out and play. That's it. Angel Reese is on a team that sucks. They just do. And so there's no conspiracy there. It's just Angel Reese is unhappy with her team. Caitlin Clark is injured. And you've got a lot of people that are capitalizing on the ignorance of new WNBA fans and feeding them bullshit so that they can get engagement. That's it. So hopefully that answers your question. Thank you for answering. All right, so we've got a few minutes left. Here's what I want y'all to do for me because I'm going to look at the chat during the commercial break. And as a matter of fact, we're on a delay, so I might not even get it till we're back from commercial break. But what I'd like y'all to do for me is go into the chat and put some of the points that y'all want to talk about when it comes to the Cowboys game in the chat because honestly, there's a lot to cover, good and bad. And I do want to focus on the good, but I also want to make sure that I answer your questions. And I'd like for this to be a fun conversation. And so I know there's some things that I'm going to go off on a tangent on, but I also want to make sure and address some of the things that are on y'all's minds, because I'm pretty sure at this point we've talked about CeeDee Lamb and his 4 drops, and that's been beat to death. And we've probably talked about Javonte Williams to death. So what questions do y'all still have on this Tuesday evening that we can discuss? I know since we do have a few minutes before the break, one of the people that I do want to give flowers to is Malik Hooker. I know he got some love on Twitter for how well he played, but I just feel like his name has not been brought up enough because when I was going back and watching film and just looking at the number of times that it was Malik Hooker flying downhill to try to get a stop, and don't get me wrong, Saquon Barkley is strong as fuck. So I'm not mad at Malik Hooker for not bringing him to the ground every time, but there were multiple times where if it weren't for Malik Hooker flying downhill and hitting Saquon Barkley, the person who made the tackle wouldn't have even got there because dude was ready to take the fuck off and Hooker was like at least changing his direct trajectory and at least slowing him down and at least putting him into a position where somebody else could come and make the tackle. And when I say he didn't get enough credit for that, literally, I mean it. I was watching the broadcast version, and one of the announcers was like, I don't know who that was who came in and made that hit. And I'm like, his name is Malik Hooker. I'm like, I know how this game goes. I know y'all have a piece of paper right there where you can look down and see his name. His name is Malik Hooker, and it's not his first time doing that. So how about we give credit where it's due? At least make an attempt. And then one time they just outright didn't acknowledge what he did at all. I think it was Marshawn Nealon who was credited with the tackle. And the announcer was like, oh, great job, Marshawn Nealon. And I'm just like, so we're just going to act like we didn't see Malik Hooker fly across the screen and hit this man to slow him down? Oh, man. But no, I think the stat sheet showed it because I think he got a team high in tackles. I think it was like 9. So it did show up on the stat sheet that he was putting in some work. But I just feel like in the narrative about this game and the storylines that people have taken away from it, he hasn't been talked about enough. Even in the interviews that happened, I don't even remember him being interviewed. And I'm like, nobody wants to talk about him putting out fires all night. Like, nobody wants to talk to him about this performance. So I just hope he continues to show up in that way because the defense is going to need it. And not saying anything bad about the defense. I mean, that's just him playing his role. That is something that, as a safety, he was doing his job. Now, what I will say is this. The fact that he had to do it so much does kind of point to, some things that maybe need to be improved up front. And I think some people have addressed that. The linebackers didn't do what we wanted them to do, but also Maris Lewifau didn't get as many reps as I think people wanted him to get. And that seems like, based on Shadi's comments, it may be tied to some disciplinary things. And I don't know if that's going back to the week leading up to this game and something that happened during practice, or if the fight that he got into early in the game was enough for Shadi to be like, you know what? Sit your ass down. Like, we can't have you out here acting like this because we know Shadi is serious about these guys not fighting and not risking unnecessary penalties, right? So I'm not sure. But the linebackers, there's room for improvement there. And that room for improvement is directly related to Malik Hooker's performance. So I'm glad that he was able to do what he did. I'm glad he did what he did. But also, he shouldn't have to do that. There was also something else that I'm going to talk about. And it actually has to do with a little bit of criticism of Jalen Hurts that I want to talk about whenever we come back from the break. Because people were criticizing Jalen Hurts, and I'm just like, if you've been watching the Dallas Cowboys since preseason, what Jalen Hurts did was actually kind of smart. So we're going to talk about that after the break. But in a few seconds, we're going to go to commercial here and pay some bills. So if you have popped into the stream, just do me a favor, hit that like button, say hi in the chat, and we'll talk more about the Dallas Cowboys when we come back from the break. This is an episode of Bitches Love Sports, and I'll see y'all on the other side.
Let's be honest. Wheelchairs are heavy, bulky, and ugly. If you carry a wheelchair in your car to take care of a loved one, you know how hard it is getting that clunky, old-style wheelchair in and out of your car. Introducing the Feather Chair Wheelchair. At 13 pounds, it's the world's lightest wheelchair. It folds in seconds and fits neatly in your trunk, backseat, or closet, so you can take it everywhere. And it's only available right here. Order yours today and get a free wheelchair case, a $50 value, yours free. The Feather Chair, the world's lightest wheelchair, is just $4.99 with easy payments as low as $16 a month. Sorry, no Medicare or insurance accepted. So call right now to order yours.
800-823-5826. 800-823-5826. 800-823-5826. That's 800-823-5826.
If you are trying to quit drinking or doing too many drugs, listen to me. You don't know me and we'll never meet. I had a problem like you once. I drank and used to party a little too much till it got out of control and almost ruined my life. I realized I needed help to fix my problem before it totally destroyed me. If you've tried to fix your drinking and drug problem and you know you can't do it alone, you need to call the National Treatment Advisors. They'll immerse you into a 30-day program to replace your old habits with new habits and totally change your life. And if you have PPO private health insurance, the entire program may be covered. Fix your problem right now before it gets any worse. Get clean. Call now and learn more. 877-247-1581. 877-247-1581. 877-247-1581.
What's up? We are back. All right, so let's see what y'all put in the chat. JV asked who played better, Sanborn or Murray, and then said hint answers neither. So thanks for that spoiler, JV, and also said I believe Maris Leofau can be the green dot, and Isaiah Land and Shamar James should get playtime. Yeah, I actually was anticipating that Maris Leofau would be the green dot. Now, I don't know who got it on Thursday or who had it the most or if it was switched. But with Maris Leofau having experience with it last season, I expected that to continue. But obviously, with snaps as limited as what he got, that's not a thing that's really going to happen because your green dot kind of needs to be on the field. Anyway. Moving on from that, though, so one of the things that I wanted to find, I actually can't find. Essentially, what I was referring to before the break when it comes to Jalen Hurts and the criticism, there was criticism of his passing yards. Basically, he had a lot of short passes against the Cowboys, and there was a chart that showed it that I was going to pull up for you guys, but I can't find it, so it is what it is. But if you've been around on Twitter, you've probably seen it. The chart that showed that a lot of his passes were very much underneath, and people were using that to compare him to Dak Prescott, and basically suggest that Dak Prescott was a better quarterback because Dak Prescott had more deep throws. But my thing about it is this. One of the things that we saw in preseason was that the cornerbacks were leaving a lot of room underneath. There was a lot of cushion. And I think in preseason there was a question of like, okay, are there so many opportunities underneath for quarterbacks because of who's on the field, or is it a scheme issue? And I think what we saw was the fact that it's both. In other words, if what you're doing defensively gives a quarterback that many opportunities to just be like, all right, I'll take these 5 yards, I'll take these 7 yards. Like, why would they not take the easy route if it'll give them 5 to 7 yards each time? Like, why would they make the situation hard on themselves? So that's why when people were criticizing Jalen Hurts for that, I was just kind of like, how can you criticize him that when at the end of the day they won the game? And at the end of the day, if you look at what was happening, that seems to be the smart thing to do. Like, he played smart. They got a whole season ahead of him where they can crack open the playbook and he can go for the long throws, the deep throws. And against the Cowboys, he just didn't have to, so he didn't. And so I would just say, like, as a Cowboys fan, I would actually be like, okay, why were there so many opportunities for him to do that, and work his way down the field that way, as opposed to like using it as a reason to rip on Jalen Hurts? I just saw Clement show up in the chat. What's up, Clement? I want to see what you're talking about. You said, we have to be more consistent in the run game on offense and start to develop chemistry with Pickens and Ferguson in the pass game. Can't be CD dependent on offense. Okay, so let's talk about that a little bit, because I feel like that's been kind of the topic of the week so far, is just the consistency of the run game, and also George Pickens and what he is or is not bringing to the table. Here's what I'm gonna say about the run game first, and I gotta think about Tyler Booker's interview specifically when I talk about the run game, because Tyler Booker, in his interview that was released yesterday, said something like he wanted to improve, or he'd have to improve in order to be the kind of player that he wants to be, which, much respect to him, I don't think anybody would expect a rookie to come out and be like, oh yes, I'm exactly where I need to be. I know I'm ready for the Hall of Fame after one game. So I'm not saying that he doesn't need to work on things. I'm sure he does. But like, can we just go back to last season and how anytime they ran a run play between the tackles, like, Cowboys fans collectively had to hold their breath? Like, that was something that they could barely even do. You know what I'm saying? And so just even to see that happen so many times let me know that, like, okay, we finally have a guy who can do that. We finally have guys on the line who can block for him to be able to do that. So while people want to see more consistency, people want to see the run game even used more. Even Brian Schottenheimer himself said that he wished he could have gotten more attempts for Javonte Williams. I don't disagree with any of that. But I think this is one of those situations where we have to remember this was one game. This was one game, right? And so with it being the first game, and with it being that, some things happened that were a little bit weird, I look at this as a sign of progress. I look at this as something that they can build on. So, I don't really feel a way about it at all. I liked what I saw from the run game, and I totally trust them to figure out their flow from there. So yeah, not mad at it. I feel like Javonte Williams should give himself a pat on the back. Not too much of a pat. Players, we need them to stay even keeled and not really rest on their laurels. But like, in terms of giving Cowboys fans something to be hopeful for, I would say they did that. Like, they played physical. Javonte Williams was running hard. The O-line was definitely doing their job. Even the use of like Hunter Lipke, the use of the tight ends, there were some really cool things that we saw as far as like, split flow and whatnot. What's up, Clint? Good to see you in the chat. AOC is in the chat. AOC, you need, while you're talking about the studio looking fancy, you need to come down here. Come visit me. Come through. We'll talk about it. But what was I saying? Oh yeah, there were some split flow things that were happening. So I'm just like, while people are talking about the consistency, I'm just excited about what I saw, because I'm like, pre-snap motion runs that were actually successful in between the tackles. I'm just like, we actually had a situation on the goal line, and this shouldn't be something that like people are like, oh my God, I can't believe we did it. But how many times last season were we on the goal line and it just felt like we could not get the ball across the line? And now we see this, and I got to give Schottenheimer his props for this because leading up to the game against the Eagles, he was asked a lot about, different ways that he might think about his dad or pay homage to his dad. And if you notice that run play for that first touchdown that the Cowboys got, the formation for that was kind of a play on the old school T formation, a little bit, right? It was kind of a play on that. And so, like, I peeped that. I looked at how Hunter Lipke, I think it was Hunter Lipke, I looked at how the fullback was used. Like, I just assume it's him because he's the only person that I think that they would use that way. But I really just like the formation. I like the setup. I like the execution. And I'm just like, cool. Now that we know he can do this, now they can plan for this to happen more often, because maybe they didn't plan for him to have like 25 carries in this game because they really didn't know how the run game was going to go. I don't know, but I just liked what I saw in that aspect, and I'd like to see more of it. I should have pulled up my notes from my film watching for this, but yeah. So there was that. There was the use of the split flow. I know for a fact, just off the top of my head, Ferguson definitely had some split flow action at least once that I was like really impressed by. I thought that was really smart because I feel like last season when it came to helping out, especially the left tackle, when it came to helping out Tyler Guyton, a lot of times the answer was just like, okay, put a tight end over there by him and they should help. And that wasn't really always the right answer, right? But I feel like what they were doing with having a guy come across the formation and block, or using the split flow sometimes, I feel like that was a much better way of helping out Tyler Guyton without feeling like you had to put somebody over there to babysit for him. Because for one, it made the defense have to think about it. You could tell that there were a couple of times those linebackers were surprised that somebody came and knocked the shit out of them, right? So I like that. Like, more of that. And two, it definitely gave them an option to where if it turns out that's not needed, it's less of an adjustment. You know what I'm saying? So I really like what they did there. Now, let's talk about the Pickens of it all. Because when it comes to George Pickens and what he brought to the table, his contributions, his targets, there are some people who are in the camp of George Pickens didn't get enough targets. So it makes sense that he's frustrated. It makes sense that he's upset. I can totally understand why that would have shown up and maybe he took some plays off. So let me just put this out here right now. I don't give a fuck how frustrated you are. As a receiver, part of your job sometimes is going to be blocking, especially with it being that there's one ball, and most of the time it was 3 receivers out there, sometimes 2. But, like, there's more than one of y'all out there, which means only one person's going to get the ball. So if you're on the field, you need to be prepared to block if that's what you're assigned to do for a particular play. I don't care if you're frustrated. I don't care if you're scared. And I'm going to talk about the scared piece of it in a second. That's your job. So I don't care what people have to say about it or why they think it happened or what might have been going on. To me, there's no excuse. Not for somebody like Pickens, who's in a contract year, who came here talking about I'm a team guy. It's 1A, 1B. I'm prepared to do my part, talking all this good shit in the offseason. Then all of a sudden the game comes around and you half-assing your routes when you're not the target. Not okay. Not okay. Now, the reason why I brought up the word scared is because some people are wondering if it's the case that since he doesn't have a contract in place right now, is that why he's taking plays off? The reason why I say no is because this is a pattern. Now, when George Pickens was brought to the Cowboys, a lot of people were talking about his supposed off-the-field issues. And a lot of that I thought was kind of over-exaggerated, played up. It was kind of bullshit, right? But this piece of it, him like not actually doing his part, I feel like if they wanted to have a conversation about whether or not George Pickens would be a good addition, this is what should have been brought up. Him doing things like this, the lazy route running, taking plays off, not blocking, so on and so forth, because this is actually a real issue. And I found an article in 2020 from 2023 where this was actually addressed. George Pickens was asked about, not blocking, his quote unquote lazy route running. I'm not saying lazy. This is how people described it. And he literally said that the reason why he wasn't blocking the way people expected him to was because he was afraid of getting hurt. Now, you're on the field with a bunch of other men who all talk about being willing to put their bodies on the line for their teammates. How the hell you fix your lips to say in public to the media so that they can publish your quotes that you're scared to block because you're afraid of getting hurt? And I think this happened around a time where there was a Texans player who had gotten severely hurt. But to say that out loud, like, you shouldn't even feel comfortable saying that as a football player. So I don't know if that's still the case, if he's still scared, or if he just hasn't built up the habit of blocking the way that he's supposed to block. But whatever it is, it needs to be fixed. And this is something that CeeDee Lamb was criticized for at several points during his career, right? I think in 2023, he was criticized for his route running just in general. People were saying that he just wasn't a good route runner. And then in 2024, last year, that's when Troy Aikman called him out specifically. Like, he called out all the Cowboys receivers specifically, but named CeeDee Lamb and called him out for lazy route running. And CeeDee Lamb was like, I need to be a better leader. I need to be a better player. Held himself accountable and improved, right? And so that's something that George Pickens is going to have to do. If CeeDee Lamb had to deal with it for a couple of years and eventually had to figure it out, George Pickens, he's at that point as well where, especially if you think about it linearly, he's 1 year behind CeeDee Lamb. So CeeDee Lamb had to figure it out in his fourth year. Well, this is George Pickens' fourth year. It's your turn to figure out the whole blocking thing. Nobody cares that it's your contract year. It's your fucking job. Get it done. So that said, I'm trying to see what y'all are saying in the chat. Chris says, I didn't watch the Giants game. Okay. So on that note, let's move on to talking about the Giants game. And we can always come back to the Cowboys and what we've seen from them. I'm going to say this. This is definitely has opportunity. This weekend definitely has the opportunity to be a comeback game for the Cowboys, if you want to call it that. I mean, it's only week 2. But anybody who did watch the Giants game, I don't think they're afraid of anything that the Giants are bringing to the table. On either side of the ball. I have a little bit more film to watch, but what I did watch kind of looked like I think our defense is going to do really well against them. I think our defense is going to have a much easier job when it comes to penetration. Because, like, against the Eagles, that was one of the things that disappointed me in the very beginning, was that it looked like the Cowboys defense was having trouble with penetration. And then it just seemed like it took a really long time for them to start doing anything in terms of blitzing. I feel like the entire first half of the Eagles game, Eberflus was like, we just go 4-man rush all night. And it wasn't really doing the job we needed to do. And then in the second half, especially after the whole storm delay, that's when you started seeing them doing some things which I forget the name for it, but it's like they had Trayvon Diggs on one side and somebody else on the other side. And I remember a couple of times specifically, they made it like they had Trayvon Diggs off the line of scrimmage. So it looked like he would be the one to drop into coverage. But then after the snap, the guy who was closer to the line of scrimmage ended up dropping, and Trayvon actually went in for the blitz. And one time he actually got to Jalen Hurts. He didn't bring him to the ground, but he got back there quick as fuck. And I'm just like, yes, this is what we need, right? So second half, they finally started blitzing. And I feel like if they incorporate a little bit more of that, I know Eberflus isn't known for his disguises and stuff like that, but if they incorporate a little bit more of that, especially earlier in the game, I don't see them having any problems against the Giants O-line, or especially with the goals of the attack front, some of the things that Eberflus has mentioned in terms of wanting to speed up the clock of the quarterback, wanting to pressure them, kind of throw them off their game a little bit. I don't see any of that being a problem. I feel like Kenny Clark, Osa, Solomon Thomas, they're going to have a fun night. Well, a fun day. This is a noon game, right? And then when it comes to what the Cowboys are bringing to the table on offense, I think they're going to improve there as well, even if just because they're probably going to run the ball more. Like I said, they had to see how some things were going to look in a real game situation. And I think now that they've seen it and they see what works, I feel like they're going to build a game plan around what they know works. And here's why that's smart. Because I know people want to talk a lot about what the Giants are bringing to the table and the threat of Malik Neighbors and, what happens if they put Jackson Dart in? Okay, that's all good to think about. But what we're really dealing with is two teams that both have to make adjustments from week 1. Both the Giants and the Cowboys are coming into this game 0-1, looking for their first win. So what we saw the Giants put on film, they're probably going to make some adjustments. They're going to do some things differently. And what we saw the Cowboys put on film, they're definitely going to make some adjustments. So right now, it's really smart for both teams to just worry about themselves, because if you try to plan around what you've seen from the opposing team, you're going to get something wrong. So when Schottenheimer is in his press conference talking about we're worrying about ourselves, yada, 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 I'm like, great. Because there's enough for the Cowboys to fix just worrying about their own game plan, without having to account for the 50,000 things that the Giants might do based on the chemistry between their quarterback and the receiver, or which quarterback they decide to put in the game, right? If they just make those differences in terms of taking away some of those opportunities underneath that Jalen Hurts had when he was in the game, if they make some of those differences in terms of when and how often they blitz, if they make some of those changes in terms of, what the linebackers are doing, and make it so that Malik Hooker doesn't have to put out fires all goddamn night, the defense is going to look better. And those changes can be made without even thinking about what the Giants are bringing to the table. And on the offensive side, if they can look and be like, yo, we got a guy who can help us get some runs straight up the middle now, we're going to do that more. If CeeDee Lamb cleans up the dropped passes, if they can kind of build off some of the things that the tight ends were doing and that Hunter Lipke was doing in terms of, the blocking across the formation and the split flow, and use that a little bit more, make it look different. They've got more options on offense. Once again, without even having to think about what the Giants are bringing to the table. So I really do like the fact that Schottenheimer is like, yeah, we're going to make sure that we're prepared for both Russell Wilson and Jackson Dart. But at the end of the day, we're more worried about ourselves. In week 2, I feel like that's the smartest thing to do. What are y'all talking about in the chat? Clement says, remember, Eagles have the best offensive line in the league. Credit to the defense for making necessary adjustments after the weather delay. 100%. 100%. JV says, I expect to see Jadon Blue on Sunday. A lot of people are hoping for that. It's kind of hard to predict because, while obviously people are hoping to see Jadon Blue because of what he brings to the table as a runner, but then you've got Schottenheimer making comments about consistency and competitiveness, and nobody really knows what's going on in those areas or why exactly Jadon Blue or even Mozzie are being mentioned in those particular conversations. So I'll say I'd like to see him. I'm not necessarily getting my hopes up. I'm just gonna wait until Sunday and see what happens. JV says, I don't expect that drop pass scenario to rear its ugly head ever again this season. I don't either. And I'll say this, JV, when I was watching the film, even the technique CD was using to catch the ball looked off. For a second, I was like, is he hurt? Did he hurt his hand? Because it was just the way that he was reaching out for the ball was kind of weird. I don't know what happened there. I'm just going to trust him to fix it. I believe in CeeDee Lamb. He has grown and matured over the years in ways people didn't even predict a couple years ago. So to see the footage of him out there on Friday on the jugs, to hear him talk about, taking accountability, to hear both Dak and Shoddy talk about him taking accountability, I trust him to fix it. Now, one of the other things that Shoddy did say, he kind of snuck in a little line that kind of suggested that Pickens was going to get more targets on Sunday. And I don't know how serious it was. It was something to the effect that when Pickens sees his targets on Sunday, something. I'll look it up, and we can talk about it tomorrow night when I do my late night Wednesday Night Live. But yeah, we'll just see how that goes. But no, I don't see the drop passes being an issue. Let's see what else y'all are saying. Scrolling up. Chris, what are you not trolling about? Clement said, defensively, we have to stop Tyron Tracy and Bo Scadaboo in the run game, and contain Russell Wilson runs and force him to be a pocket passer. Yeah, 100%. And we've already heard players talk about that. Shoddy talked about the threat of the deep ball from Russell Wilson, but also so did Kenny Clark. I think there are some fans who have written off Russell Wilson. They kind of look at him as washed up. He's 36 years old, hasn't seen a lot of success. But there's no indication that the Cowboys or anybody associated with them is taking this game lightly. They're not selling him short in terms of what he can do if you don't watch him. Chris says, I'm not trolling. I really don't know. I watched him in college, but didn't think he would do anything in the league. Plus, he went to my rival college, so I hate his ass off for it. Who are you talking about? Who do you hate? I don't know. Remind me who you're talking about, Chris. I have no idea who you're talking about. Clement also said, respect for accountability by Tyler Booker. We have to be able to run effectively and against very good Giants defensive line with Dexter Lawrence, Calvin Thibodeau, and Abdul Carter. Yeah, agreed. No, like with Tyler Booker, like I was just so ready to sing his praises. And I don't think he's down on himself either. Like I really feel like Tyler Booker has a very healthy perception of his own performance. Knows that he has more work to do, but also knows that what he did was good and that he got the job done. Dan B said, with Shadi's comments about Blue, it makes me wonder about the whole lazy thing being true. Possibly. So here's something I've said before about athletes, especially young athletes. Because I think sometimes when people hear that a player isn't consistent or that they're lazy, the assumption is that that's like a negative feedback about who that person is. But what actually happens is that sometimes athletes don't know how hard they have to try until they have to try that hard. And I'm trying to think of a way to make sense of that statement. It's basically like, I think the way the average person can relate to it is like if you've ever had to work at something, like I'm sure most of us, if we haven't been athletes, we've at least worked out. And maybe you had a workout routine that worked out for a while and then you hit a plateau. And then you're like, okay, I got to up my routine. I got to increase my weight. I got to increase my reps. I got to start doing different movements. I got to change the way that I warm up and cool down to take care of my body, because now I'm starting to get sore from these workouts, so on and so forth. And maybe you hit a plateau again, or maybe your goal changes. And then, over time, you have to change your workout routine a few times. And eventually you get to a point where you're like, dang, I never imagined I'd be squatting this much. I had a client who was like that. Like when she came to me, she could barely do goblet squats. And after probably about 6 months, she's like doing barbell back squats and all kind of stuff that she literally never thought she'd be strong enough to do, right? But had I told her from jump, hey, eventually I want you squatting 150, she'd have been like, the fuck? So in my mind, watching this client, I was like, all right, we're going to start her here. We're going to move her here. And eventually, just looking at her form, so on and so forth, I believe she could get here. Right. And so I think the same thing happens with young athletes sometimes, especially if they come from a program where they were considered really good and got a lot of praise. And then they come to the league and they've literally never had to work as hard as they have to work in the league, And so it's like they might be at a certain point, like let's say there's physical levels to working hard. And so maybe in college they were here and then they get to the league and it's like, oh, now I got to work this hard. And then somebody's like, that's not hard enough. Really? Okay. Well, I'm going to work harder. And then they're like, that's not hard enough. What? This is the hardest I've ever worked in my life. It's like, all right, I got to work harder. Right. And so it's like, they don't know that where their coach wants them to be is way up here. They're starting here and they're like, I'm here. And this is the hardest I've ever worked in my life. And it sounds like Shadi's not settling for, this is the hardest you've ever worked in your life. He's like, I don't care. I need you to work this hard in order for me to say that you're doing what I need you to do. That's what it kind of feels like. Because Shadi's never said anything negative about these guys or suggested that they're not good teammates or that they don't bring the right things to the table. He's literally just talked over and over again about consistency. So that's just kind of my assumption there based on what I've seen from young athletes, what I know about young athletes, and how that usually goes, especially with young, gifted athletes and them kind of learning what they need to put in terms of work. So, like always, thank you guys for joining the stream. Thank you guys for being active in the chat. Don't forget to hit the like button on your way out. Join me tomorrow night. We can go more in depth on some of these topics. But this has been another episode of Bitches Love Sports. Join me every Tuesday at 5 p.m. Central right here on YouTube with NTX Radio. I'll see y'all tomorrow night. And make sure those notifications are turned on. Bye.
From Burleson to Venus and Grandview to Godley, this is the voice of Johnson County, Joco Community Radio. Attention all business owners and creative minds. Do you need a unique and personalized touch for your products? Look no further than Romika Laser Engraving and Custom Designs. I'm Ron Phillips, co-owner of Romika Designs. We offer custom laser engraving services for a variety of products, including promotional items and corporate or personal gifts. With state-of-the-art equipment and a team of skilled designers, we can engrave intricate designs on virtually any material. Whether it's a special message